Welcome to the Power of Partnership podcast. I'm Riane Eisler, President of the Center for Partnership Systems. This podcast brings you the voices from the partnership movement, people using partnership practices to build a world that values caring, nature, and shared prosperity. The Power of Partnership podcast is hosted by Cherri Jacobs Pruitt, a health policy and partnership scholar. Today, Cherri interviews John C. Havens on the intersection of technology and culture. In addition to being a prolific writer, speaker, and activist, John is the sustainability practice lead for the IEEE Standards Association and founding director of the IEEE Global Initiative on Ethics of Autonomous and Intelligent Systems. And now on to the POP podcast, showing how we can use technology to meet the needs of people and the planet.
All right. Well, welcome, John. I'd love to ask you to start by sharing a bit about your work with the IEEE and your writings and your journey that's bringing you to today.
Sure. Thank you. The shorthand version of it is the connection between technology and well-being. And when I say well-being, I mean both human and ecological flourishing. So I've written 3 books. The first was called Tactical Transparency, about social media, how to be open in what you do online. And this is back, that book came out in 2009, so it was early on in the social media realm. The second book was called Hacking Happiness, Why Your Personal Data Counts and How Tracking It Can Change the World. And then my most recent book is called Heartificial Intelligence, loving the puns, easy writing, Heartificial Intelligence, Embracing Humanity to Maximize Machines. And my background before that was I was a professional actor for years. I played guitar and I'll play harmonica later as a musician, and did business development, PR. I was an EVP of a top 10 PR firm. I did biz dev at a podcasting company, actually. And so a lot of my work that's led me to IEEE, the world's largest engineering and technology association, is a combination of thought leadership, writing and speaking, community development oriented. So that's a long answer, except my work then led me to IEEE, where I, since 2016, have led their largest body of work on artificial intelligence and ethics. And that led to a big document called Ethically Aligned Design that's inspired multiple, like OECD, UNESCO, groups around the world for their AI principles. The largest suite of AI ethics-oriented standards, the IEEE 7000 series, I helped inspire, was founding chair for 2 of them.
How do you concretely use Riane's partnership domination continuum throughout your work?
Yeah, Riane's partnership versus domination continuum, especially in her recent toolkit, it's Riane and the authors, the different team members had put it together, just did a beautiful job. I think initially meeting people like, what do these words even mean? Domination versus partnership. And then right away, her toolkit, her indicators that statistically provide metrics along the lines of what GDP does for economics are brilliant in terms of caregiving economics. So those are the 2 main tools that I will let people know about, but I try to let them understand after saying, read Riane to say it, because she says it the best, is partnership, the opportunities to unpack that word. One way or the other, you're going to be communicating with someone and coming to an agreement of some kind for any, at least most senses of a partnership. So with engineers, a lot of times what I say is, where in the system is the funding for the technology you're building coming from? Because a lot of times engineers are working on a not necessarily the very, very beginning of a design of something. They're working on something that's got the green light and the money to back it. And all that goes back to what a beautiful and necessary opportunity from the top of any design of policy or technology to say, hold on, let's think about what Riane has said. What would this technology look like? And the toolkit that she's put out helps with this. If you started from a place of saying, how would this tool be used for partnership versus domination? And it's great if people are like, I don't know what that means. Well, read Riane's work, go to the toolkit. So you could say, well, how do we know we're going to be helping the planet? Well, we're not just going to use water from that aquifer and make sure that we don't harm, whatever via emissions or something. We're going to do X to replenish that water, working with the community and all the stakeholders.
So are you seeing any best practices in terms of the work you're doing with IEEE members to help them understand this need to base technology on the ultimate well-being of humans and the planet?
So in terms of work that I'm doing in IEEE that I would consider best practices, hopefully, and thank you for asking, is I help lead a program called Planet Positive 2030. We just released a paper called Strong Sustainability by Design, and the subtitle is Prioritizing Ecological and Human Flourishing for Technology-Based Solutions. So what we're hoping that this document does is, like Riane's methodology and logic in general, is first of all just to come from a lens of the term strong sustainability. When people use the word sustainability, they have different working definitions. Oftentimes there's one from the United Nations Brundtland Commission, which essentially, I'm going to paraphrase, is making sure there's enough resources for ourselves and those that come after. And that's not the best paraphrase, but it's a wonderful definition because it moves from just being like, how do we have enough for right now in 10 years to sort of saying, hey, generationally, how are we ensuring these things? Then there's a term called regenerative. That's really kind of like biomimicry oriented, both for humans and the planet. How do you make sure that resources are not harmed, but maintained? And that's part of our planet positive. That word positive we actually mean, it's not just neutral. You build technology, no, I'm giving back to the planet through circular design, what have you. Anyway, what strong sustainability has as a theory, however, which I would just say is like the bedrock of, or I'll call it ground truth, is an individual or a community or a company or a government or a country. The center circle is economics, right? I got to make food. I got to buy food. I got to eat food. I got to earn money, right? And now at a household level, community, government, country level, that those economics are run in a very specific way, mainly because who's elected to run the government, et cetera. The circle around that, so picture that first circle is economics. The next circle is the societal, which usually is cultural, which is certainly political. But are we talking about the U.S. and democracy or China? And, in America, we call them an authoritarian government. They don't necessarily call themselves authoritarian. But the point is that those two next circles would be very different based on regionality. For any of those two inner circles that you and I could come up with, what about an indigenous community? What about Global South? Great. The circle surrounding them all is the environment, is the planet. And why this actually makes it easier for any technological design, and this is what we're trying to convince people best practices with our paper, is as engineers, there's a term called boundary conditions. It's kind of like a scope. And you say to engineers, use the science of like the ISSC, the United Nations Sixth Synthesis Report that says, these are the things we have to focus on in terms of emissions. Or the Montreal Biodiversity Framework. Here are some really good stats and meaty data about maintaining nature, right? Nature, all of nature. There's the emissions, there's nature. And then recognize that strong sustainability means at the outset of design, that's a lot in there. I understand that. But the point is that that's where you start from.
In your writings, you make a very compelling case that for many people, they're not thinking about values in the actual work they're doing. They're thinking about values in their home life and their relationships, but not necessarily bringing that to the actual work. And so can you speak a little bit about that specific to technology?
My book, Heartificial Intelligence, Embracing Our Humanity to Maximize Machines. The key question in it is, how will machines know what we value if we don't know ourselves? So before I talk, I'm now going to play harmonica, and I'm doing this as part of my answer. But here we go. Enjoy. Hopefully.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Well, thank you.
That's a treat. Thank you.
Sure. So 2 books ago, I read this book called Hacking Happiness, which was really about the intersection of technology and human physiology. And so one of the reasons I just played harmonica, besides the fact that I just love it, is there's a physical reaction to music. Now, when taste enters into it, whoever listens, maybe they like blues, maybe they don't. But right away, the modality of how we're communicating changed. But the technology that's making us have a Zoom call and someone watching this later, they're watching and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, someone's playing harmonica. So it's a whole different part of one's physical senses that come into play there. And physiologically, the sound enters in their ear and it starts to deal with the chemicals in their body, things, dopamine, what a lot of people call the happiness hormones. And I bring this up because that book, Hacking Happiness, is what really led me to understand the deep connection to one's values, lived values, and then the physical interaction with technology. And how I think a lot of times people don't recognize that technology doesn't have to be like the new thing, like ChatGPT, where they go like, hey, everyone, this is technology. You're using technology now. The lived experience with technology, when it first enters your life, it just does. Now, when I wrote this book, Hacking Happiness, years ago, was focused on the quantified self. That term is kind of morphed into just, the Apple Watch. And people are so used to monitoring their heart rate. But you can monitor things like your stress level, measuring your heart rate or your galvanic skin temperature, your eyes, their pupils dilate, and you can use it while you watch Netflix to give ads at the exact right moment. Certainly when you go into the metaverse, which is a term coined by Neil Stephenson, the author of Snow Crash, not Mark Zuckerberg. But the point being, in that realm, how we're going to interact with people becomes very specific. And as a rule, humans are very easy to trick or manipulate. So the second book, Heartificial Intelligence, I worked with a wonderful woman named Peggy Kern, who is an expert in positive psychology. She worked with Martin Seligman, who wrote the book Flourish, which is kind of the basis for the empirical science behind positive psychology. And we emulated this wonderful guy's research and just had about 50 people participated, which we were thrilled at because it was for 2 weeks, and getting people to do anything is hard, but for 2 weeks. We said, with using very simple online sliders in an app, at the beginning of these 2 weeks, give yourself a life satisfaction score in general, 1 through 10. And then we said, for these 10 values, very common words, and there's a psychologist named Joseph Schwartz who uses these terms: family, environment, work. On a 0 to 10, at the beginning of this process, just say, this is how important this is. So if being outside is critically important to every part of your life, then make that a 10. Then what we asked is, at the end of every day, we'd send an email. Hey, how did you live today? 0 to 10. Did you go outside? I didn't. 0. Okay, it's not a judgment. It's just a report. Then at the end of the 2 weeks, you aggregate. And you say, for an average 2 weeks of my life, like no one died, or I didn't change my job, or I'm not moving, I'm not on vacation. So a kind of typical 2 weeks. What happened? And we had a 95% ratio of people sent back of those 50% who said their long-term flourishing or their life satisfaction went up from their initial score, usually by at least 2 or 3 points, just by tracking their values. Because then they realized, I said at the beginning of this test that the environment was like an 8, but if this is an average 2 weeks, I scored a 2. So I should be outside every day, and I'm going to take my work calls outside. And this was like you didn't need a piece of technology to do that. You could have done all this, what we've done on the back of a napkin. So the tracking the values is something that, and the reason I asked the question in the book, how will machines know what we value if we don't know ourselves, is we are being tracked and influenced through very nuanced, articulated behavioral economics to mainly buy things. It's about purpose-driven sense of how do we have partnership. And those are values that I talk about in the book. And in terms of my job now, a lot of what I try to do is to say, as beautiful as AI systems can be, and anything that you say with AI systems, how do we ensure that there's genuine consent for data and that people recognize your data is worth tracking because you are worth tracking, your values, if you know what they are.
You are listening to the Power of Partnership podcast. If you would like us to share your partnership story, or if you would like to become a proud sponsor of the POP podcast, please contact us at center@partnershipway.org. And now, back to today's episode.
There is this fact, I think I mentioned earlier, but if not, isolation, loneliness, suicide is at pandemic levels around the world right now. And where there's different AI tools being used to help with those things, there's a lot of them, and they're doing wonderful work. Like, for instance, soldiers in PTSD coming back from war, they speak to chatbots. And that's sort of the way to get out like the horrible stuff in their head, and then they can talk to humans. Like, these are methodologies that have been shown to be used in those work environments for soldiers. And so thank you to our military and thank you to the people that have done that. But where isolation really is most easy is solved, here we are, ready for it? You have people be with other people. It's not that hard. And so partnership and what Riane's talked about, it's like, do we want to prioritize the economics, continue to prioritize the economics and the dominance, where logic would say, well, we can get these tools out that will help people. And I don't mean to mock those voices, because a lot of times they're very well intended. But to use tools to work so hard and spend billions of dollars, where the money goes to a very small, tiny portion of people who make the tools and control the data, A. But B is to say, hey, society, if the metrics of success were partnership and eradicating the loneliness and isolation leading to suicide, the tougher way to ask this question is, are we okay as a society with suicide? And I don't mean denying people's choice. I mean, fundamentally, from teens up, people at age 8 or 9, not feeling that they have connection for themselves to others or to nature to the point where they remove themselves. And also loneliness and isolation along with suicide. The job that we all should have on our resume and be equipped for is helping others avoid isolation.
So thank you so much, John, for sharing all your wisdom and experiences with us. I feel like we could probably do 4 or 5 more episodes and still just be touching the tip of the iceberg around all of the issues related to technology. So I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts today. I wonder if you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners on how we can use technology in a heartificial way, in a way that's really coming from the heart and incorporating our values to meet the real needs of people and the planet.
Sure. Well, thank you again, Cherri, to you, as always, to the amazing Riane Eisler and her team. Thanks to IEEE, where I work. As I mentioned, I'm talking as John. So my answers, if people have questions about IEEE, let me know. You can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, or what used to be called Twitter, John C. Havens on Twitter. I still like calling it Twitter. And And I guess my ultimate message would be, it's really hard to be kind to oneself sometimes. I struggle. I'm 54. I'm a parent, and my kids are older now, but like you're always recognizing, as a parent, these two people have looked to me for advice and counsel for a long time, and I want to be helpful with them, but when I'm struggling with things I've never struggled with before, how do I help them well? So as a parent, this kindness sort of comes when you're like, okay, I'm learning as much from those people as who become adults and beautiful humans of their own as I've wanted to imbue them with my wisdom, such as it is. The last couple of years, I've had this gift of working in sustainability because really a lot of times kindness these days most deeply comes to me when I'm in nature. And I was at my local pool the other day, which I've been taking great pleasure in, and just sat, and clouds came in. There was a storm that came in. It was breathtaking just to see the majesty of our planet, just to take in and have the wonderful, like, classic sense of the word awe come in. And my grandmother sang a hymn, How Great Thou Art, which a lot of people know. And there's a verse that says, what is it? I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. And the chorus is, and sings my soul, my Savior, God to thee, how great thou art. But for me, being in nature and just being in nature brings a kindness that really has gotten into such depths for me to then say, okay, I feel like nature in one sense kind of accepts me, even as broken as I feel. And then to take that kindness or acceptance and then say, I think I have worth. And I have all these people who say they love me, so that's a big deal. So then gratitude comes into play. And these are the tools that I've equipped myself with to then say, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, how do you avoid isolation? And then how do you try to be with other people and bring kindness? And this is where Riane's work, I cannot tell you how much joy her work has brought me, because even saying the phrase partnership versus domination, I lose this, like, getting on a call and I'm going to convince someone with my wisdom, to kind of going, I just want to be here. And if I feel okay about who I am and there's a kindness for myself, then I get on the call and I'm like, well, I try to listen more. Not always good at listening. I mean, thank you, because I just did an interview. But the point being, hearing people and then saying, how do I take that wisdom of those clouds coming in and those storms and the message that I think Mother Nature is giving us, which is, I love you, but I'm also your mom and I got to do what I got to do. And what I'm doing right now is getting hot because I love you guys, but you're doing this. And the partnership model is the only way that we're actually going to avoid climate change issues that are already here, that all the science says. We have right now today, people in Pakistan with the floods, people in Greece with the fires. We're going to say that climate's good to go, or more and more, without trying to be judgmental about climate denying it all, it's just to say this is a really hard time emotionally. It's going to be for the entire world, people who aren't already struggling with climate disaster, because this is the ultimate question of humanity. Will we be here in 10, 20, 30 years? Which for me means, how are my kids going to be doing? How are my grandkids going to be? And then I care about this beautiful planet. And it's hard to care. It's easier to say, be competitive and all that. It's easier to take these narratives. And so my final point is to say, anybody, if you haven't read The Chalice and the Blade, if you don't know about the technology toolkit, if you don't know the gift of Riane Eisler and the work that she's done with the various thought leaders throughout the time that she's been on this planet, it's just challenging for me to say at what depths you will be helped in your work and in your life when you get to know how to actually try to even live this idea of partnership versus domination. It starts up here and in here, your heart, and then daily. I often will think of Riane, literally 5 or 6 times a week minimal, and her idea of caregiving versus competition, because we need care. We don't necessarily need every new technology that comes down the pike. Those things can be great for helping with care. What we need as humans is connection and care and partnership. That is actually the need so that we keep this beautiful planet safe. And thanks again, Riane, for the honor to be a part of your ecosystem and do the best that I can to bring your wisdom to others.
Beautiful. Thank you again so much, John, for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
For our listeners, I just want to let you know that all of the resources that John has mentioned will be included in the show notes for today's episode. We'll also include a link to the technology toolkit through the Center for Partnership Systems website, as well as all of the other Center for Partnership Systems courses and resources to help you go deeper into understanding her work, including a link to the chalice and the plate. Thank you for listening to the Power of Partnership podcast. We're grateful to Rising Appalachia for the use of resilience as our Power of Partnership theme music. If you would like us to feature your partnership story, or if you would like to be a proud sponsor of the Power of Partnership podcast, please contact us at center@partnershipway.org. We hope you enjoyed this episode and will leave us a review on your favorite podcast channel. And don't forget to subscribe to be notified when new episodes are released every other Tuesday. I'm Cherri Jacobs Pruitt. See you next time on the Power of Partnership podcast.
I am resilient. I trust the movement. I negate the chaos. Uplift the negative. I'll show up at the table again and again and again. I'll close my mouth and learn to live.